My sister kicked me out on Christmas morning. The red folder I revealed made everyone freeze and her husband leave. The crisp December air hung heavy with the scent of pine and cinnamon, but inside Lysandra Thorne's opulent home, a different kind of chill permeated the atmosphere. 78-year-old Elara Vance, her elegant silver hair meticulously styled, observed the scene unfolding around her with a quiet, practiced resignation. Christmas morning, a day meant for warmth and connection, felt colder than the winter outside, a stark contrast to the festive decorations that shimmered and sparkled with an almost mocking brilliance. Lysandra, her niece, bustled about, orchestrating the unwrapping of gifts with a forced cheer that barely masked her impatience, her movements sharp and efficient, like a conductor rushing through a piece she no longer enjoyed. Corvus, Lysandra's husband, a man whose smile rarely reached his eyes and whose gaze often darted towards his latest acquisition, was already engrossed in his new high-tech gadget, a sleek virtual reality headset that seemed to transport him miles away from the domestic scene. He barely acknowledged the presence of the woman who had, in essence, funded his lavish lifestyle, a fact that hummed beneath the superficial pleasantries like a low, discordant note. Elara had arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, as instructed, bearing carefully selected gifts. For Corvus, she had spent weeks searching for a rare antique watch, a timepiece from a bygone era, hoping it might evoke a fleeting moment of genuine appreciation for history or craftsmanship. For Lysandra, she had commissioned a bespoke cashmere scarf, knowing her niece's penchant for luxury and hoping the soft, exquisite fabric might convey the warmth Elara yearned to share. And for her grandnephew, Leo, who she adored more than life itself, she had chosen an educational tablet, envisioning his bright, curious eyes lighting up with discovery. She had harbored a quiet hope, a fragile wish for a genuine embrace, a heartfelt, Merry Christmas, and Elara, the kind of spontaneous affection she had dreamt of for so long. Instead, she received a perfunctory nod from Lysandra, who barely looked up from her organizational flurry, and a dismissive wave from Corvus, who was already on a business call, his voice a low, self-important rumble. The gift exchange itself was a hurried affair, devoid of any real joy or ceremony. Lysandra tore through her gifts, her movements rapid and almost violent, pausing only to grunt an unenthusiastic, "Oh, another scarf," before tossing it onto a growing pile of discarded wrapping paper and forgotten presents. The cashmere, chosen with such care, lay crumpled amidst the chaos, ignored. Corvus, after a quick, almost contemptuous glance at the antique watch, set it aside with a barely audible, "Nice," his attention already drifting back to the glowing screen of his gadget. His lack of interest was palpable, a cold wave washing over Elara. Only Leo, with the innocent wonder of a 10-year-old, truly seemed to grasp the meaning of the moment. His eyes wide with genuine excitement, he genuinely thanked Elara for his tablet, his small hands carefully holding the device as if it were a treasure. Elara's heart, which had been a tightly clenched fist all morning, hardened by years of similar disappointments, softened momentarily for him, a brief flicker of warmth in the encroaching chill. The tension, however, was a living entity in the room, coiling tighter with each passing moment, an invisible weight pressing down on Elara. Lysandra, ever observant of trivial details while missing the emotional landscape, eyed Elara's still full teacup, a delicate porcelain cup from a set Elara herself had gifted them years ago. "Aunt Elara, are you quite finished?" she snapped, her voice edged with impatience. "We're about to start brunch, and I need the space for the additional place settings." Elara, who had barely taken a sip, simply nodded, her gaze unwavering, her expression unreadable. It was Corvus, however, who delivered the final, crushing blow. He cleared his throat loudly, a deliberate, attention-seeking sound, interrupting a story Elara was trying to share with Leo about her own childhood Christmases, a simple tale of warmth and tradition that felt entirely out of place in this cold, materialistic environment. "Elara," he began, his tone dripping with a condescension that scraped against Elara's raw nerves, "we really appreciate you coming, but you know how busy Christmas mornings are. We have a lot of family coming over later, and frankly, we're a bit short on space. Perhaps you could join us for dinner instead. Just a quiet one, perhaps next week." The implication was clear, cutting deeper than any direct insult could have. She was an inconvenience, an outsider, a relic to be politely shunted aside, her presence deemed less important than extra elbow room for guests who had contributed nothing to the very foundation of this home. Ilara's eyes, usually warm and inviting, crinkled at the corners with what felt like decades of suppressed pain, then turned to chips of glacial ice, reflecting the coldness of their words. For decades, she had poured her heart, her time, and her vast fortune into this family, raising Lysandra as her own, ensuring their comfort, their education, their every whim. She had imagined this life, this family, as her legacy, a testament to Arthur's love and her own devotion. And now, on Christmas morning, in the very home her money had purchased and maintained, where every lavish detail, from the grand piano to the custom-made drapes, bore the silent imprint of her generosity, she was being politely, but firmly, kicked out. A profound stillness settled over Ilara, a quiet, almost spiritual shift. The clamor of the children's excited chatter, the distant clinking of champagne glasses, the superficial chatter about new possessions, it all faded into a distant hum, a meaningless backdrop. A lifetime of quiet sacrifice, of unrequited affection, of biting her tongue in the face of their casual cruelty and outright exploitation, culminated in this single, unbearable moment. A deep, resonant click sounded within her, not audibly, but in the very core of her being, a sound of something irrevocably breaking, but also of something new, unyielding, forming. The dam had broken, not with a rush of tears, but with a surge of crystalline clarity. "Of course," Ilara said, her voice eerily calm, devoid of any discernible emotion, a flat, level tone that surprised even herself. Lysandra, expecting a protest, perhaps a tearful retreat, or even a plaintive plea, paused, a flicker of surprise, almost confusion, in her eyes. The expected drama was absent. "I understand completely." Ilara rose from the plush armchair, its expensive upholstery a gift from her, her movements slow and deliberate, imbued with a newfound dignity. She picked up her small, elegant handbag, a simple leather clutch that suddenly felt like a symbol of her independence. "I do hope you both have a truly wonderful Christmas," she offered, a polite, almost detached benediction. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Leo, who looked up at her with innocent concern, offering him a small, sad smile that conveyed a universe of unspoken regret for him alone. Then, without another word, without a backward glance at the family who had just delivered the final, most profound insult, Ilara Vance walked out of the opulent living room, past the glistening Christmas tree that reached almost to the vaulted ceiling, and out the front door, leaving behind not just the physical space, but the chilling silence of her irrevocable decision. Lysandra and Corvus exchanged a quick, knowing glance, a smug satisfaction playing on their lips, completely oblivious to the earthquake they had just triggered, the tremors of which would soon shatter their carefully constructed world. The path to that frosty Christmas morning had been paved with Ilara's boundless love, her profound loneliness, and the substantial inheritance left by her beloved late husband, Arthur. Arthur Vance, a self-made titan of industry, had been a man of immense foresight and even greater heart. His empire, built from sheer grit and intelligent investment, had ensured Ilara would never want for anything, not a single material comfort, for the rest of her days. His passing 20 years prior had left a gaping void in her life, a chasm of grief and solitude that she had desperately tried to fill with the warmth of family, a family she yearned for. With no children of her own, her younger sister's daughter, Lysandra, had become the focus of her affection and generosity from a very young age, a small, fragile vessel into which Ilara poured all her latent maternal instincts and a lifetime of unspent love. Ilara had effectively raised Lysandra after her sister's untimely death when Lysandra was just 8 years old. It had been a sudden, tragic loss, and Ilara, heartbroken herself, had stepped into the role of surrogate mother without a second thought. She had ensured Lysandra received the finest education money could buy, believing that knowledge and opportunity were the greatest gifts. She enrolled her in exclusive private schools, where tuition rivaled that of a small university, and funded her university degrees, not just one, but two, because Lysandra couldn't quite decide what she wanted to do, flitting from one interest to another with little commitment. Elara had paid for every textbook, every school trip abroad to exotic locales, every exorbitant tuition fee without a single complaint, often feeling a quiet satisfaction in providing opportunities she herself had not had. When Lysandra expressed a fleeting interest in art history, Elara financed a year-long sabbatical in Florence, complete with a generous living allowance and private tutors. When she suddenly decided architecture was her true calling, Elara paid for the specialized software, the expensive drafting tables, and even rented her a chic studio apartment near the university, simply to ease her commute, neglecting to notice that Lysandra rarely used the studio, preferring to socialize. Financial support wasn't merely a gesture, it was the very foundation of Lysandra's adult life, the invisible scaffolding that held up her entire existence. When Lysandra met Corvus Blackwood, a charming but fundamentally opportunistic man with an expensive taste and an even more expensive future vision for himself, Elara had harbored quiet reservations. His polished veneer barely concealed a mercenary gleam in his eyes, a calculating nature that Elara, perhaps blinded by her desire for Lysandra's happiness, chose to overlook. Corvus, a real estate agent with more ambition than actual success, saw Elara not as a warm, loving aunt, but as an inexhaustible goldmine, a resource to be tapped repeatedly. He subtly, then overtly, encouraged Lysandra's dependency on Elara's wealth, skillfully weaving a narrative of investments and family support that absolved them of any personal financial responsibility. Their first significant request came when Lysandra and Corvus decided to marry. They desired a lavish wedding, one far beyond their combined, modest means. Elara, wanting her niece to have the fairy tale day she deserved, the kind of grand celebration she herself had foregone, paid for everything, the exclusive country club venue, the designer gown that cost more than a modest car, the gourmet caterers, the live band that played their favorite songs, even the extravagant honeymoon to the Maldives. The total bill exceeded $250,000, a sum Elara paid cheerfully, hoping it would buy her a place in their hearts, a permanent seat at the family table. It bought her only a temporary seat at the head table, a fleeting moment of prominence before she was relegated back to the periphery. Then came the house. Lysandra and Corvus fell in love with a sprawling, 4-bedroom property in an affluent suburb, a house they could never have afforded on their combined, modest incomes. Corvus, ever the negotiator, with a glint in his eye, presented Elara with a meticulously calculated proposal, a substantial down payment, followed by assistance with the monthly mortgage payments just until they got on their feet. He presented it as a shrewd investment, a way to secure Lysandra's future. Elara, again, provided the entire down payment, a staggering $500,000, and for 15 years, she had quietly, diligently, transferred funds monthly to cover their entire mortgage, property taxes, and even the often neglected homeowners association fees. This was the house Elara had just been asked to leave, a home that was financially hers in all but name. The cars, too, were a recurring theme, a constant drain on her funds. Lysandra had a penchant for luxury SUVs, updated every few years as soon as the latest model appeared. Her current model, a sleek German vehicle with all the trimmings, was the 5th car Elara had purchased for her outright, or significantly contributed to the down payment and monthly installments, each transaction accompanied by Lysandra's casual thanks and immediate demands for accessories. Corvus, not to be outdone, drove a high-end sports sedan, also a gift from Elara, purchased during a particularly successful deal he had closed, which, upon closer inspection of the books, turned out to be mostly Elara's investment capital cleverly disguised as his acumen. Even their children, Lysandra's 2 sons, Leo and Finn, benefited from Elara's open purse strings, though Lysandra was careful to minimize her aunt's role to them. She paid for their elite private school tuitions, ensuring they had access to the best resources and connections. She funded their numerous extracurricular activities, hockey equipment, piano lessons, robotics club, summer camps, always responding to Lysandra's urgent phone calls with immediate transfers. She even provided their weekly allowances, which were far more generous than most children their age received, ensuring they never felt a moment of financial discomfort. Lysandra would often call Elara, not to chat or inquire about her well-being, but to casually mention a new opportunity for the boys, always followed by an immediate request for funds. Leo needs new hockey equipment, Aunt Alara, it's terribly expensive, you know how quickly they outgrow things. Finn's class is going to Costa Rica, it's an educational trip, of course, absolutely vital for his development. Alara never said no, each refusal feeling like a betrayal of her own desire to be a loving presence. The emotional toll of this one-sided generosity was immense, a silent weight that Alara carried daily. She yearned for genuine connection, for the simple warmth of family. She would invite Lysandra and Corvus for Sunday dinners, carefully preparing their favorite dishes, only to have them cancel last minute with flimsy excuses about unexpected social engagements or feeling a bit under the weather, leaving Alara to eat alone at her grand dining table. When she offered to babysit the boys, Lysandra would accept with a grateful sigh, then deposit them at Alara's doorstep with a long list of instructions and a dismissive, "Don't spoil them too much, Auntie," before disappearing for the weekend, leaving Alara to cherish the boys' company, knowing it was merely a convenience for their parents. The calls she received were almost exclusively transactional, a request for money, an update on a bill they couldn't pay, a complaint about a financial struggle that Alara could instantly alleviate, never a simple, "How are you, Aunt Alara?" Their disdain for her grew subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, then more overtly, in direct proportion to their dependency. They would often speak over her, dismiss her opinions as old-fashioned or out of touch, and openly mock her frugal habits, her sensible sedan, her preference for quality over flash, her quiet life, unaware that her very frugality allowed their extravagance. Lysandra once scoffed, "Aunt Alara, why do you still drive that old sedan? Don't you know it makes us look bad? People talk." Corvus frequently reminded her that her contributions were simply investments in their future, implicitly suggesting they were doing her a favor by allowing her to spend her money on them, almost as if she owed it to them. They never expressed gratitude, only expectation, a constantly expanding, voracious expectation. Alara's attempts to forge deeper bonds were repeatedly rebuffed, leaving her heartbroken. She offered to teach Lysandra her beloved grandmother's recipes, hoping to pass on a culinary legacy, but Lysandra claimed she was too busy, too modern for such things. She suggested they take a vacation together, to reconnect, but Lysandra and Corvus always preferred their own exclusive, Alara-funded trips to exotic locales, sending postcards from afar that highlighted their luxurious escapades. She watched, heartbroken, as they reveled in their opulent lifestyle, enjoying the fruits of her labor and love, while she remained on the periphery, an ATM with a pulse, a quiet presence whose only value lay in her financial contributions. The final insult on Christmas morning wasn't an isolated incident, it was the crescendo of decades of calculated emotional neglect and relentless financial exploitation. Alara had convinced herself, time and again, that their coldness was simply a byproduct of their busy lives, that deep down, they appreciated her, that true family love wasn't about grand gestures but quiet devotion. But being unceremoniously dismissed from her niece's home, on the very day that epitomized family warmth, was a betrayal that shattered the last vestiges of her self-deception, laying bare the painful truth she had refused to acknowledge. As she drove away from the house she had bought, through the perfectly manicured streets she had helped maintain with her taxes, a quiet fury, long suppressed beneath layers of hope and hurt, began to bloom in her heart. She was done. The reservoir of her patience had finally run dry. Alara drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white against the dark leather. The familiar route, usually a comforting path, now felt charged with a quiet, almost electric energy, the energy of a profound, irrevocable decision. The cold silence of her own grand, yet lonely, home enveloped her as she stepped inside, the echoing emptiness amplifying her new resolve. She didn't bother to remove her coat, its familiar weight a momentary comfort. Instead, she walked directly to her study, a room that had always been her sanctuary, filled with the comforting scent of old books and polished mahogany, the quiet ticking of an antique grandfather clock the only sound. From a locked drawer in her antique desk, a piece that had belonged to Arthur and embodied solidity and permanence, she retrieved a worn, red leather folder. This wasn't merely a folder, it was a testament, a meticulously kept record of every single cent she had ever spent on Lysandra and Corvus. Every tuition payment, every car title, every mortgage transfer, every credit card bill she had settled, every loan that was never repaid, every lavish gift, it was all there, painstakingly documented, receipt by receipt, transfer by transfer, for over 2 decades. The red folder was her silent witness, a monument to their ingratitude, a stark and undeniable ledger of their financial dependence. She picked up the phone, her fingers steady, devoid of any tremor of doubt, and dialed a number she knew by heart, her private banker, Mr. Henderson. It was still Christmas morning, a time when most people were celebrating with loved ones, but Alara knew Mr. Henderson, a consummate professional and discreet confidant, would respond, understanding the urgency in her call. "Mr. Henderson," she stated, her voice clear and resonant, a new timbre of authority in it, "this is Alara Vance. I apologize for disturbing your holiday, but I need to make some immediate and substantial changes to my financial arrangements. These cannot wait." Mr. Henderson, recognizing the gravity in her tone, the uncharacteristic urgency in her usually placid voice, listened intently as Alara laid out her instructions, each word delivered with precision and finality. "I want all standing orders for Lysandra Thorne and Corvus Blackwood immediately cancelled. This includes the monthly mortgage payment for their property at 14, Willow Creek Lane, all car payments associated with their vehicles, and the allowances for Leo and Finn. Furthermore, I want any credit cards issued under my name but used by them, or linked to their accounts, immediately revoked. And please initiate the process to revoke any powers of attorney I may have granted to Lysandra over the years, effective immediately." She paused, allowing her words to sink in, then added, her voice dropping slightly but gaining in steeliness, "Finally, I want to explore the legal avenues for the recovery of assets purchased with my funds that are currently under their names. I have extensive documentation to support these claims, Mr. Henderson. The red folder will be at your office tomorrow morning." Mr. Henderson, a man accustomed to navigating the intricate currents of immense wealth and the occasional dramatic shifts in family dynamics, understood the unspoken subtext. "Certainly, Miss Vance. I will begin processing these requests immediately. The credit cards will be deactivated within the hour. The standing orders will be cancelled by the end of the business day, latest tomorrow morning, as soon as the systems are fully operational after the holiday. As for the asset recovery, I will connect you with Mr. Davies, our lead counsel for such matters, first thing after the holiday. He is exceptionally skilled in these types of complex cases." Alara then called Mr. Davies herself, leaving a succinct but firm message on his voicemail, outlining her intentions, knowing he would be equally responsive. The wheels of justice, or rather, financial rectification, had begun to turn, quietly but inexorably. Meanwhile, back at 14, Willow Creek Lane, Lysandra and Corvus were enjoying a boisterous brunch, their laughter ringing through the house, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred beneath their feet. A few days later, the first tremors began, subtle at first, easily dismissed. Lysandra, attempting to pay for a new designer handbag at an upscale boutique, a sequin clutch she had coveted for weeks, was met with a polite but firm, "I'm sorry, ma'am, your card has been declined." Lysandra, mortified, her face reddening with embarrassment, tried another card, then another, all linked to Alara's accounts. "All declined." "Impossible," she hissed to the sales assistant, her voice rising. "There must be some mistake. My aunt manages these accounts. She handles everything." She stomped out of the store, attributing it to a temporary system glitch. Corvus, attempting to fuel his high-end sports car, found his corporate fuel card, also linked to Alara's business accounts, declined at the pump. He called his bank, then Alara's, only to be met with vague responses about account changes and security protocols that could not be discussed without the primary account holder's permission. He dismissed it as a temporary glitch, annoyed but not yet alarmed. He simply used his personal card, which he rarely touched, and made a mental note to call Alara later. The following week, the full force of Alara's decision began to hit, no longer dismissible as glitches. Their housekeeper, Maria, who had been paid directly by Alara for years through a standing order, informed Lysandra, with a regretful shake of her head, that her direct deposit had not arrived. The landscapers, who meticulously maintained their sprawling gardens, the pool maintenance company, which kept their heated pools sparkling, even the personal trainers who sculpted Lysandra's physique, all reported unpaid bills, their services abruptly suspended. Lysandra, growing increasingly agitated, tried to access her main checking account online, the one into which Alara's substantial monthly transfer flowed, only to find that the deposit, which covered their mortgage and most of their lavish expenses, had not arrived. Her stomach dropped, a cold, empty feeling spreading through her. Corvus, she shrieked, clutching her phone as if it held the answers to her rapidly unraveling world. The money. Aunt Alara hasn't sent the money. The mortgage is due, and my cards are all declined. Everything. Her voice was shrill with rising panic. Corvus, who had just received a stern notice from the car dealership about a missed payment on his sports car, a payment he had assumed Alara would cover, felt a cold dread creep up his spine, a premonition of financial ruin. What are you talking about? She always transfers it automatically. It's never late. Call her. There must be some mistake. She's old, maybe she forgot. Lysandra tried Alara's number. It went straight to voicemail, ringing hollowly in the suddenly silent house. She tried again, and again, her calls going unanswered, her frustration mounting with each unanswered ring. Alara, having anticipated this flurry of desperate communication, had put her phone on silent, choosing instead to find solace in a classical music concert at the Symphony Hall, a small pleasure she had often denied herself in favor of being available for her family, a silent slave to their whims. She was embracing her newfound freedom, one tranquil note at a time. Days turned into a week. Bills piled up, stark white envelopes filled with increasingly threatening red letters. The mortgage payment was officially late, accruing penalties. Utility bills, usually paid seamlessly by Alara's direct debits, began to accumulate overdue notices, threatening disconnection. The boys' elite private school tuition, due at the end of the month, loomed like a dark cloud, its enormous sum impossible for Lysandra and Corvus to cover. Leo and Finn, accustomed to their generous allowances, began complaining, their young voices adding to the rising cacophony of stress. Mom, can I get that new video game? My allowance hasn't come through in weeks. Dad, I need new cleats for hockey, but the card isn't working at the sports store. Lysandra and Corvus, for the first time in their adult lives, were forced to confront their actual financial standing, which was precisely zero, a terrifying vacuum. Panic began to set in, a cold, insidious dread that gnawed at their carefully constructed facade of prosperity, threatening to devour them whole. This is insane. Lysandra cried, pacing their opulent living room, which now felt less like a grand home and more like a very expensive trap, a cage built of their own greed. She can't just cut us off. She's our only family. She loves us. This is some sort of cruel joke. Her voice cracked with genuine fear. Corvus, ever the pragmatist when faced with personal financial ruin, his mind racing through contingency plans, was already calculating their dwindling options. Love us? She's trying to ruin us. She's clearly lost her mind. We need to go see her. Immediately. This is a misunderstanding. She must be confused. She's old, after all. Perhaps she has forgotten our arrangements. The desperation in his voice was clear, the slick confidence of the real estate agent replaced by the raw fear of a man losing everything. He knew, deep down, that without Alara's money, his entire world, built on a foundation of borrowed luxury and fabricated success, would collapse. He wouldn't just lose the house, he'd lose his carefully cultivated image, his social standing, and likely, his marriage, which was already showing cracks under the financial strain. The tension in their home became unbearable, a suffocating blanket woven from resentment and fear. The laughter of the children, once a cheerful sound that echoed through the spacious rooms, now seemed like a mocking echo, a reminder of the carefree existence that was rapidly slipping away. Lysandra and Corvus began to snap at each other, their carefully maintained veneer of marital harmony cracking under the relentless pressure of impending financial disaster. They were two spoiled children suddenly denied their unlimited allowance, and they were furious, terrified, and utterly bewildered by a world that no longer catered to their every whim. They decided to confront Elara, not with humility or understanding, not with an apology for their past behavior, but with a sense of righteous indignation, convinced she was the one in the wrong. The following morning, Lysandra and Corvus, their faces etched with a mixture of anger, fear, and a terrifying sense of unwavering entitlement, drove to Elara's sprawling estate. The opulence of the property, visible even from the main road, grated on their frayed nerves, a reminder of the wealth they felt was rightfully theirs. They had called repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic messages, but Elara had not answered, her silence a profound statement. They had no choice but to show up, uninvited, forcing a confrontation, convinced that once they spoke to her face to face, she would relent, would see reason. The ornate wrought iron gates to Elara's property, usually open for their convenience, a silent invitation to her generosity, were closed. Corvus had to ring the intercom, a small, impersonal button that felt like a barrier. "Aunt Elara. It's Lysandra and Corvus. We need to talk. It's urgent," he practically shouted into the speaker, his voice a strained mixture of command and desperation. A moment of profound silence stretched, broken only by the distant chirping of birds, then Elara's calm voice, devoid of any warmth or recognition, emanated from the speaker. Her tone was measured, distant, like a stranger speaking. "I am not expecting visitors. If you wish to discuss anything, you may make an appointment through my attorney, Mr. Davies." The mention of an attorney was a shock, a cold, legalistic declaration of war. "Your attorney?" Lysandra shrieked, incredulous, her voice rising in pitch. "What are you talking about? Open the gate, Aunt Elara. This is family. You can't do this to us." Her hands clenched into fists, pounding lightly on the cold metal gate. "The gate will remain closed," Elara replied, her voice unwavering, a steady, unyielding force. "My attorney will be in touch with you regarding the specifics of your situation." The line went dead. But Corvus, seeing his opulent future slipping away like sand through his fingers, was not deterred by a closed gate. He drove the car to the side of the property, found a gap in the carefully manicured hedging, and despite the prominent, private property, signs that clearly stated, "No trespassing," they both clambered through, their expensive clothes catching on thorns, rushing towards the front door of the grand mansion, convinced that sheer persistence would overcome Elara's resolve. They pounded on the solid oak door, the heavy brass knocker echoing hollowly. After several agonizing minutes, which felt like an eternity of humiliation, the door opened a crack. Elara stood there, dressed impeccably in a soft cashmere twin set, her posture ramrod straight, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Her eyes, however, held no flicker of recognition, no warmth, no sympathy, only a cool, impenetrable resolve that seemed to freeze the very air around them. "Aunt Elara, what is going on?" Lysandra burst out, her voice raw with a mixture of fear and fury, attempting to push past her aunt into the welcoming warmth of the foyer. "My cards are declined. The mortgage payment didn't go through. The housekeeper quit. Are you trying to ruin us? Do you want us to be homeless?" Elara held up a hand, a small, elegant gesture that nonetheless stopped Lysandra in her tracks, an invisible barrier. "Come in," she said, her voice soft but firm, but only for a moment. "And understand this is not a negotiation. This is simply an explanation." They stepped into the elegant foyer, their usual boisterous presence subdued by Elara's chilling composure, the quiet dignity of her bearing. The air felt thick with unspoken tension. Elara led them to her drawing room, a space filled with tasteful antiques and priceless art, where the red folder lay conspicuously on the polished coffee table, a silent, damning witness to their past. "Sit," she commanded, her voice soft but imbued with an undeniable authority. They sat, uncomfortably, on the very edge of the antique sofa, its plush velvet suddenly feeling alien beneath them. "I have made a decision," Elara began, her gaze sweeping over their anxious, indignant faces, lingering for a moment on the folder. "For years, I have poured my heart and my resources into you both, particularly you, Lysandra. When your mother passed, I swore I would give you the best life possible, to ensure you lacked for nothing. And I believe I did." She gestured to the folder, its worn red leather a stark contrast to the polished wood. "In here are the meticulous records of every single financial contribution I have made. The $500,000 down payment on your house, and the 15 years of mortgage payments I've made, totaling well over $1 million. The 5 luxury cars I've bought for you, Lysandra. The high-end sports car for you, Corvus. The countless lavish vacations, the elite private school tuitions for the boys, the generous allowances, the endless designer clothes, the myriad bills I've settled without question or complaint." Lysandra scoffed, her anger momentarily overriding her fear. "Aunt Elara, we're family. That's what family does. You have more than enough. You're wealthy. We were simply benefiting from your good fortune." Elara's eyes hardened, becoming chips of pure, unyielding ice. "Family," she echoed, a faint, bitter smile playing on her lips, a smile devoid of mirth. "Is it family that kicks an elderly woman out of her own house on Christmas morning? Is it family that treats their benefactor as a personal ATM, an endless resource to be exploited without gratitude? Is it family that belittles, dismisses, and scoffs at the very person who sacrificed her own peace, her own desires, for their comfort and their fabricated prosperity?" Corvus, sensing Lysandra's emotional outburst was backfiring, that her indignant tone was only hardening Elara's resolve, quickly stepped in, attempting to inject his usual charm, though it faltered under the intense scrutiny of Elara's gaze. "Elara, don't be dramatic. It was a misunderstanding. We were simply busy that day. We love you. You're our aunt, our matriarch. We cherish you." He tried to move closer, to take her hand, to offer a comforting gesture, but Elara recoiled, her body stiffening, as if his touch were venomous. "Love?" Elara's voice, though still quiet, was now laced with steel, cutting through his hollow words. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You loved my money. You loved what I could give you. You never loved me. Not truly. You saw me as a bottomless well, a resource to be exploited, an old woman to be tolerated as long as the money flowed freely and without interruption." Lysandra's eyes welled up with performative tears, a familiar tactic she had employed since childhood. "How can you say that? After everything we've done for you? We included you in our lives. We let you spend time with the boys. Included me?" Elara's laugh was hollow, a desolate sound that echoed the emptiness of her years of sacrifice. "You included me when you needed a loan, when a bill was due. You included me when you needed a babysitter so you could pursue your own pleasures. You included me when you wanted to brag about your luxurious lifestyle, a lifestyle I paid for. You never once asked about my day, my health, my feelings, my dreams. You never truly saw me as a person, only as a means to an end, a convenient source of funds." She picked up the red folder, her gaze fixed on Corvus, whose face had begun to pale. "Corvus, you, with your grand schemes and your empty promises. You encouraged Lysandra's dependency, feeding her insatiable desires. You preyed on my generosity, seeing me as a foolish old woman easily manipulated, a weak link to be exploited. You believed you were entitled to my late husband's legacy, a legacy he worked his entire life to build, not for your selfish indulgence, but for true security and happiness, a foundation of genuine value." Corvus paled further, the blood draining from his face, his usual slick charm evaporating under the brutal honesty of her accusations. "Elara, please. This is madness. We'll pay you back. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll be more attentive. We'll visit every day. We'll change, we swear." His voice was laced with raw desperation, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "Too late," Elara said, closing the folder with a decisive snap, a sound that resonated with finality. "The well is dry. The taps have been turned off. As of now, all financial support for you both, and for your children, has ceased. Permanently. Furthermore, my lawyers have already begun the process of reclaiming assets that were purchased with my funds and are registered in your names. This includes the house at Willow Creek Lane, which was purchased entirely with my money. The cars. Any significant gifts that can be proven to be solely my financial contribution. My documentation is extensive, as you can see." Lysandra gasped, her face draining of color, her eyes wide with true, unadulterated terror. "The house? You can't. Where will we go? What about the boys? You'll make us homeless. You'll destroy their lives." "That," Elara said, rising slowly to her feet, her gaze steady and unwavering, "is no longer my concern. You are both capable adults. You have 2 university degrees, Lysandra, paid for by me. You are a real estate agent, Corvus, capable of earning a living. It is time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet, without relying on the generosity of others." She walked to the door, opening it wide, a silent dismissal. "My decision is final. There will be no further discussions. My lawyer will contact you with the specifics. Good day." Lysandra and Corvus stared at her, stunned, their faces a tableau of shock and growing terror. The woman who had been their endless ATM, their quiet benefactor, their emotional punching bag, had transformed into an unyielding force of nature, a formidable matriarch finally asserting her worth. They had underestimated her, mistaken her kindness for weakness, her silence for complicity. Now, the full, devastating power of Elara Vance was unleashed, and they were utterly helpless before it. They had nothing left to say, no argument, no manipulation that could penetrate the fortress of her resolve. With heavy hearts and trembling hands, they rose, their movements stiff, and stumbled out of the house, leaving Elara alone, a quiet, profound sense of triumph beginning to bloom in her chest, a feeling of liberation she hadn't known in decades. Lysandra and Corvus drove home in a stunned silence, the air in the car thick with unspoken recriminations and burgeoning panic. The opulence of their home, the very symbol of their borrowed prosperity, now felt like a cruel mockery, each lavish detail a reminder of their precarious situation. Lysandra's designer handbag, once a source of pride and a symbol of her status, now seemed a ludicrous expense, a frivolous indulgence she could no longer afford. Corvus's sports car, his prized possession, felt like a ticking time bomb, soon to be repossessed, its powerful engine a hollow roar against his rising fear. The immediate fallout was brutal and swift. Within days, a formal letter arrived from Elara's attorney, Mr. Davies. It was a cold, clinical document, utterly devoid of emotion, outlining the immediate cessation of all financial support and a clear legal intent to reclaim the house, the cars, and other significant assets. It detailed their lack of financial contribution and Elara's extensive paper trail, each receipt and transfer meticulously listed. A date was set for a preliminary hearing regarding the property, a grim reminder of the legal battle to come. Lysandra, consumed by a mixture of rage, fear, and a desperate need to control the narrative, immediately called all their mutual friends, painting Elara as a senile, heartless old woman who had inexplicably gone mad and was trying to ruin them out of spite. She spun elaborate tales of their financial struggles and Elara's supposed betrayal, playing the victim with practiced ease. But Elara, through Mr. Henderson and Mr. Davies, had already quietly informed a few key individuals in their social circle, the very people who mattered in their world, about the true nature of her relationship with Lysandra and Corvus, subtly letting it be known that her boundless generosity had been met with nothing but ingratitude and exploitation. Many of their so-called friends, recognizing the precariousness of Lysandra and Corvus's social climbing and unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of such a public financial collapse, began to distance themselves, their invitations drying up, their calls going unanswered. Their social standing, once built on the illusion of wealth and connections, began to crumble, exposing the fragile reality beneath. Corvus, meanwhile, was in a full-blown panic. His real estate business relied heavily on his image of success, his network of affluent clients, and his connections, an image and a network largely bankrolled by Elara. Without her backing, without the facade of personal wealth, his carefully cultivated deals fell through, his clients questioned his credibility, and his meticulously constructed network began to fray, leaving him isolated. He tried desperately to secure loans, but his personal finances were a disaster, and his credit, always leveraged to the hilt, was now plummeting rapidly. The bank informed them their mortgage was officially in default, and repossession proceedings for the cars were imminent, their luxury vehicles now liabilities rather than assets. The boys, Leo and Finn, were the next to feel the sting of their parents' choices, though they couldn't fully comprehend the depth of their financial ruin. Their allowances had vanished, their private school tuition was unpaid, and the school administration, after polite reminders and then increasingly stern notices, informed Lysandra that the boys would not be permitted to return after the Christmas break unless the outstanding balance was settled immediately. Lysandra, frantic and humiliated, pulled them out of private school, enrolling them in the local public school, a move that crushed Leo, who cherished his hockey team and his close circle of friends, and confused Finn, who was accustomed to a very different class of peers and a world of effortless privilege. The arguments between Lysandra and Corvus escalated, becoming increasingly vicious, their voices sharp and filled with blame. "This is your fault!" Lysandra screamed, her face contorted with fury, her flawless makeup smeared with frustrated tears. "You were supposed to be the smart one. You managed the money. You said she'd never cut us off. You promised she'd always be there. My fault." Corvus roared back, slamming his fist on the kitchen counter, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. "You're the one who provoked her. You kicked her out on Christmas. You're the one who never lifted a finger to earn a decent living, who spent every penny as fast as it came in. We're ruined because of your insatiable greed and your constant demands." The dream home, the very symbol of their prosperity, became a battleground, filled with shouting and bitter accusations. Eviction notices soon followed the legal documents, delivered with cold formality. They had a limited time to vacate the property, as Elara's claim, backed by decades of meticulous financial records and irrefutable proof of her sole contribution, was unassailable. Corvus, seeing no way out, no remaining source of funds, and facing a life of financial struggle he had desperately sought to avoid, made a chilling, cowardly decision. One morning, Lysandra woke to an empty house, a silence more profound than any she had ever known. Corvus's side of the bed was cold. His clothes were gone from the closet, his expensive watch collection noticeably absent. A short, terse note, scrawled hastily on a piece of paper, lay on the dresser. "I can't do this. I'm leaving. Find your own way." He had abandoned her, choosing flight over financial ruin, leaving Lysandra to face the full, unadulterated consequences of their actions alone, a stark and desolate future stretching before her. While Lysandra's world imploded, Elara was taking her first steps towards a life of long overdue liberation, a journey of self-discovery and true happiness. The very day after Lysandra and Corvus's frantic, desperate visit, Elara made a call. It wasn't to a lawyer or a banker, but to Beatrice, an old university friend she hadn't seen in years, a vibrant woman whose infectious laughter Elara often missed. Beatrice, a widow herself, had always encouraged Elara to live for herself, to travel, to pursue her passions, reminding her that life was finite and precious. "Beatrice," Elara said, a lightness in her voice that hadn't been there for decades, a genuine joy blossoming in her chest. "How would you like to take that trip to the Greek islands we always talked about? First class, of course. My treat. No expense spared. Beatrice, sensing a profound change in her friend's spirit, a new vitality in her voice, joyfully accepted, her own excitement palpable. Elara, for the first time in memory, bought herself a new wardrobe, not functional, sensible clothes for visiting family or performing social duties, but vibrant, elegant outfits designed for comfort and style, perfect for travel and leisurely pursuits. She hired a dedicated personal assistant to manage her affairs, ensuring she would never again be beholden to anyone's schedule but her own, freeing up her time and energy. She began to plan, not just a trip, but a future, one where her money was spent on experiences, on joy, on intellectual pursuits, on herself, rather than on the endless demands of ungrateful relatives. The immense weight she had carried for so long, the burden of unappreciated generosity and the sting of emotional neglect, had finally lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace and vindication. Months turned into a year, each passing season marking a further divergence in the lives of Elara and Lysandra. The once grand house at Willow Creek Lane, now sold to a young, vibrant family who reveled in its space, stood as a stark reminder of Lysandra and Corvus's fallen empire, a monument to the fleeting nature of borrowed prosperity. Lysandra, stripped of her lavish lifestyle and abandoned by her husband, was forced to confront the harsh realities of life without Elara's endless funds. She had moved into a small, two-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet with a part-time job she despised, serving coffee in a mundane office building. Her designer clothes were sold for pennies on the dollar at consignment shops, her social circle had evaporated, and the boys, though still living with her, found her constant bitterness and financial struggles difficult to bear. Leo missed his hockey team and the effortless camaraderie of his private school friends, and Finn often called his father, though Corvus rarely answered and offered no financial aid, having disappeared into the anonymity of another state. Lysandra, once so quick to dismiss Elara's wisdom and mock her frugality, was now drowning in the consequences of her own choices, forced, for the first time in her pampered life, to truly stand on her own 2 feet, to grapple with genuine hardship. The experience was humiliating, isolating, and utterly transformative in the most painful, yet ultimately necessary, way. Elara Vance, however, was thriving. She had indeed taken that glorious trip to the Greek islands with Beatrice, followed by a luxurious cruise through the majestic fjords of Norway, and a culinary tour of Italy that delighted her senses. Her social calendar was full, not with obligations to ungrateful family, but with enriching experiences and genuine connections. She had joined a stimulating book club, taken up painting classes that allowed her to express a long-dormant creativity, and volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding profound joy in giving back to a community that genuinely appreciated her time and warmth, not her money. She found genuine smiles and heartfelt thanks in the eyes of strangers and grateful animals. Her home, once a lonely sanctuary, now bustled with activity. She hosted elegant dinner parties for her new friends, conversations filled with laughter, intellectual curiosity, and shared passions. She invested in new hobbies, indulged in fine dining experiences that stimulated her palate, and most importantly, cultivated a deep and abiding sense of self-worth that had been neglected for decades. Her eyes sparkled with a newfound vitality, her posture seemed lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted, and a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and crinkled them with true joy, was almost permanently etched on her face. She no longer carried the weight of expectation or the sting of unrequited love. Her heart was lighter, her mind clearer, and her spirit unbound, ready to embrace every new day. She occasionally heard whispers about Lysandra and Corvus. Corvus had reportedly moved to a different state, trying to rebuild his life, though with little success, his once charming veneer now tarnished by reputation. Lysandra was struggling, truly struggling, but perhaps, in time, learning humility and resilience, lessons that could never be taught through comfort. Elara felt no malice, only a quiet acceptance, a serene understanding of the universe's balance. She had given them a chance, an abundant, unconditional chance, and they had squandered it. Now, they were learning a lesson she could not teach them with money, a lesson that had to be earned through hardship. The profound truth Elara had discovered was that love and respect cannot be bought. They must be earned, freely given, and reciprocated, nurtured by genuine connection. For too long, she had mistaken financial dependency for familial affection, sacrificing her own happiness and dignity on the altar of a false hope, clinging to a mirage of family. Her journey had taught her that the most profound act of love is often the one we extend to ourselves, the courage to set boundaries, to demand respect, and to walk away from those who diminish our worth, draining our spirit and our resources. Her story became a testament to the idea that true liberation comes not from endless wealth, but from the unwavering strength of one's own spirit, and the ultimate realization that loyalty to oneself is the truest form of fidelity. Elara Vance, the woman who had once been merely a source of funds, was now living her life fully, unapologetically, and authentically, a beacon of strength and self-love. Elara's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from what no longer serves you. It's a testament to the fact that money can buy many things, but it can never purchase genuine affection or sincere respect. If you found Elara's journey of reclaiming her life inspiring, you'll find plenty more tales of justice, resilience, and life lessons right here on our channel. We share stories that resonate, that make you think, and that hopefully empower you to stand up for yourself. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where your kindness was taken for granted? How did you handle it? Or perhaps you've had to make a difficult decision to protect your own peace and well-being. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to read them.